أَوَلَمْ يَتَفَكَّرُوا فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ مَا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا إِلَّا بِالْحَقِّ وَأَجَلٍ مُّسَمًّى وَإِنَّ كَثِيرًا مِّنَ النَّاسِ بِلِقَاءِ رَبِّهِمْ لَكَافِرُونَ.
Do they not reflect on themselves? Allah created the heavens and the earth and whatever lies between them in truth and for an appointed term. Yet many people deny that they will meet their Lord.
5. This in itself is a strong argument for the hereafter. It means this: if these people had reflected over their own selves, apart from the external phenomena, they would have found in themselves the arguments which prove the necessity of a second life after the present life. There are 3 special characteristics of man which distinguish him from the other creations on the earth. 1. The earth and the countless things around it have been subjected for him, and he has been granted vast powers to exploit them. 2. He has been life-free to choose a way of life for himself. He can follow the way of belief or disbelief, obedience or sin, virtue or vice, as he likes. Any way of life, right or wrong, that he chooses, he is helped to follow it and allowed to use and exploit all the means and resources provided by God, whether the way chosen is of God's obedience or of his disobedience. 3. An innate moral sense has been placed in him, by which he discriminates between the voluntary and the involuntary actions. He judges the voluntary acts as good and bad, and decides spontaneously that a good act ought to be rewarded and an evil act ought to be punished. These 3 characteristics which are found in man's own self serve as a pointer to the fact that there must be a time when man should be called to account for his deeds, when he should be asked how he used the powers delegated to him over what he had been given in the world, when it should be seen whether he had adopted the right way or the wrong way by use of the freedom of choice given to him, when his voluntary acts should be judged, and good acts be rewarded and evil acts punished. This time inevitably can come only after man's life activity has ceased and the account book of his actions closed, and not before it. And this time should necessarily come only when the account book of not one man or of one nation but of all mankind has closed. For on the passing away of one man or of one nation, the influence that he or it has generated by his or its acts does not cease to operate. The good or bad influence left by him should also be credited to his account. How can accountability be carried out and full rewards and punishments given with justice unless the influences are allowed to run their full course? Thus, man's own self testifies that the position he occupies in the world by itself demands that after his present life there should be another life when a court should be established, his life record examined justly and every person rewarded or punished according to his deeds. 6. In this sentence, 2 more arguments have been given for the hereafter. It says that if man makes a deep observation of the system of the universe, he will see 2 things very outstanding about it. First, that the universe has been created with the truth. It is not a plaything of a child, which he might have made to amuse himself, and whose making and unmaking might be meaningless. But it is a serious system whose every particle testifies that it has been created with great wisdom, its each component has a law underlying it, and everything in it has a purpose behind it. Man's whole social and economic life and all his sciences and arts are a witness that whatever man has done in the world became possible only because he was able to discover the laws working behind everything and the purpose for which it was made. Had he been placed as a puppet in a lawless and purposeless toy house, no science and no civilization and social life could be conceived. Now, how does it stand to reason that the wise being who has created this world with such wisdom and design and who has placed in it a creation like man, who is endowed with great mental and physical capabilities, powers and authority, freedom of action and choice, moral sense and entrusted with unlimited means and resources of the world, would have created him without a purpose and design? That man would live a full life involving both goodness and evil, justice and injustice, virtue and vice, and end up in the dust, and his good and evil acts will not bear any fruit? That each act of man will influence his own life as well as the lives of thousands of other men like himself and countless other things in the world, for good or for evil, and the whole record of his life activity will be just set aside after his death, without accountability? The other thing that becomes apparent after a deep observation of the system of the universe is that nothing here is immortal. Everything has an age appointed for it after attaining which, it dies and expires, and the same is the case with the universe as a whole. All the forces that are working here are limited. They can work only till an appointed term and they have inevitably to run out in time, and this system has to end. In the ancient days the philosophers and scientists who said that the world was eternal and everlasting could have their way, due mainly to lack of knowledge. But modern science almost definitely has cast its vote in favor of the God worshippers in the debate that had been going on since centuries between them and the atheists regarding the eternal and the temporal nature of the world. Now the atheists are left with no leg to stand on. They cannot claim on the basis of reason and knowledge that the world has existed since eternity and will exist forever and there is going to be no resurrection. The ancient materialistic creed rested on the belief that matter was indestructible, only its form could be changed, but after every change matter remained matter and no increase or decrease occurred in its quantity. Therefore, it was inferred that this material world had neither a beginning nor an end. But now the discovery of the atomic energy has demolished the entire materialistic edifice. Now it has come to light that energy changes into matter, and matter changes back into energy with the result that nothing persists, neither form nor appearance. The second law of thermodynamics has proved that this material world has neither existed since eternity nor will last till eternity. It certainly began in time and has to end in time. Therefore, it is no longer possible to deny the hereafter even according to science. And obviously, when science has surrendered, how will philosophy stand to deny the hereafter? 7. Disbelievers in the meeting with their Lord, disbelieve that they have to appear before their Lord after death.
أَوَلَمْ يَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَيَنظُرُوا كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ كَانُوا أَشَدَّ مِنْهُمْ قُوَّةً وَأَثَارُوا الْأَرْضَ وَعَمَرُوهَا أَكْثَرَ مِمَّا عَمَرُوهَا وجاءتهم رسلهم بالبينات فما كان الله ليظلمهم ولكن كانوا أنفسهم يظلمون.
Have they not traveled through the earth that they may observe what was the end of their predecessors who were far mightier and tilled the land and built upon it more than these have ever built? And Allah's messengers came to them with clear signs. It was not Allah who wronged them, but it is they who wronged themselves.
9. 8. This is a historical argument for the hereafter. It means this: the hereafter has not been denied only by a couple of the people in the world, but a large number of them have been involved in this disbelief in human history. Even there have been entire nations which either denied it altogether or lived heedless of it, or invented such false beliefs about life after death as rendered the concept of the hereafter meaningless. Then the continuous experience of history reveals that in whatever form the hereafter has been denied, its inevitable result has been that the people became corrupted morally. They lived irresponsible lives, they transgressed all limits of tyranny and wickedness, which became the cause of the destruction of one nation after the other. Does not this experience of thousands of years of history, which has been traced by human generations successively, prove that the hereafter is a reality whose denial is fatal to man? Man has come to believe in gravitation only because he has always experienced and seen material things falling to the ground. He has recognized poison to be poison only because whoever took poison died. Similarly, when the denial of the hereafter has always led to the corruption of morals for man, is not this experience enough to teach the lesson that the hereafter is a reality, and to live one's life heedless of it is dangerous? 9. The words Athar-ul Ard in the original may either mean to plow the land for cultivation, or to dig the earth for taking out canals, underground water channels, minerals, etc. 10. This contains an answer to the argument of those who regard mere material progress as the sign of a nation's being righteous. They argue like this: how is it possible that Allah will make fuel of hell those people who have exploited the resources of the earth on such a large scale, who have constructed wonderful works on the earth and given birth to a grand civilizations? The Quran refutes this argument. Thus, such works of construction have also been built before by many nations on a large scale. Then, have you not seen that those nations have perished along with their civilization and their grand and magnificent works? There is no reason why the law of God that has so treated in the world the mere material progress of a people lacking the right belief and conduct, will not treat them likewise in the next world and make them fuel of hell. 11. That is, they came with such signs as were sufficient for anyone to be convinced of their being the true prophets. The mention of the coming of the prophets in this context implies this. On the one hand, there are evidences in man's own self, and in the universe around him, and in the continuous experience of human history, and, on the other, there also came such prophets, one after the other, who showed clear signs of their being true prophets and warned the people that the hereafter is sure to come. 12. That is, the destruction that overtook those nations afterwards, was not due to Allah's being unjust to them but due to the injustice they had done to themselves. The person, or persons, who neither thinks rightly, nor adopts the right attitude by listening to others, will be responsible for his evil end if he meets destruction. God cannot be blamed for this, for God has not only made arrangements for conveying to man the knowledge of the reality through his books and his prophets, but also blessed man with the intellectual resources and powers by exploiting which he can always judge the authenticity of the knowledge brought by the prophets and the divine books. Had God deprived man of this guidance and these resources and he had to meet with the consequences of following a wrong way, then doubtlessly could God have been blamed for injustice. 13. Though this thing has
ثم كان عاقبة الذين أساءوا السوء أن كذبوا بآيات الله وكانوا بها يستهزئون.
Evil was the end of those evildoers, for they gave the lie to Allah's signs and scoffed at them.
الله يبدأ الخلق ثم يعيده ثم إليه ترجعون.
Allah creates in the first instance and will later repeat it. Thereafter it is to Him that you shall be sent back.
13. Though this thing has been put forward as a claim, it contains the basis of the claim too. Common sense testifies that the one who can originate creation, can reproduce the same creation far more easily. The origination of the creation is an actuality which exists before everybody, and the disbelievers and the mushriks also admit that this is the work of Allah alone. Now it will be clearly absurd on their part to think that God who has originated this creation, cannot reproduce it.
وَيَوْمَ تَقُومُ السَّاعَةُ يُبْلِسُ الْمُجْرِمُونَ.
On that day, when the hour will come to pass, the criminals shall be dumbfounded.
14. The hour of returning to Allah and appearing before Him. 15. The word ubliso in the text means to be dumbfounded on account of a sudden shock and despair, to be confounded on finding oneself in a hopeless situation, to stand aghast on finding no means of help and support. When this word is used for a culprit, it depicts a person who is caught red-handed, who then finds no way to escape, nor expects to save himself by offering a plea in self-defense. Therefore, he stands dumb and dejected and depressed. One should also understand that, the criminals, here does not only imply those people, who have committed murders and thefts and robberies, etc. in the world, but all those who have rebelled against God, refused to accept the guidance and teachings of His messengers, denied the accountability of the hereafter, or lived heedless of it, and have been worshipping others than God in the world, or their own selves, whether or not, besides this basic deviation, they also committed those acts, which are commonly called crimes. Besides, it includes those people also, who in spite of believing in God and His messengers and the hereafter, have knowingly disobeyed their Lord and persisted in their rebellious conduct till the end. When these people will suddenly come back to life in the hereafter, against their expectations, and will find that they are confronted with the second life, which they had denied, or ignored, in their life activity in the world, they will stand dumbfounded as has been depicted in the words, Yublisul Mujriman.
وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُم مِّن شُرَكَائِهِمْ شُفَعَاءُ وَكَانُوا بِشُرَكَائِهِمْ كَافِرِينَ.
None whom they had associated with Allah in His divinity will intercede on their behalf. Rather, they will disown those whom they had set up as Allah's associates in His divinity.
16. Associates, Shuraka, includes three kinds of beings. Sad face. 1. The angels, prophets, saints, martyrs and the righteous men, to whom the polytheists assigned divine attributes and powers in different ages and whom they worshipped as gods. On resurrection day, they will say to their worshippers, "You did whatever you did without our consent, rather against our teachings and guidance. Therefore, we have nothing to do with you. Do not place any hope in us that we will intercede for you before Allah Almighty." 2. Inanimate things like the moon, the sun, the planets, trees, stones, animals, etc. The polytheists worshipped them as gods, prayed to them, but the poor things themselves were unaware that the vicegerent of Allah was worshipping them so humbly and devotedly. Evidently, none of these also will come forward to intercede for him. 3. The arch-criminals, who by deception and fraud, or by use of force compelled the servants of God to worship others, e.g., Satan, false religious guides, and tyrants and despots, they themselves will be in trouble there. Not to speak of interceding for others, they will rather try to prove before God that their worshippers and followers were themselves responsible for their crimes, and therefore, they should not be made to bear the burden of their deviation. Thus, the polytheists there will not get any intercession from anywhere. 17. That is, the polytheists will themselves admit that they had wrongly held them associates of God. They will realize that none of them really had any share in Godhood. Therefore, in the hereafter they will disown the shirk on which they insist in the world.
وَيَوْمَ تَقُومُ السَّاعَةُ يَوْمَئِذٍ يَتَفَرَّقُونَ.
On that day, when the hour will come to pass, people will be split into groups.
18. That is, all communities and groups that have been formed in the world on the basis of race, country, language, tribe and clan, and economic and political interests, will break, and the people will be regrouped on the basis of true belief, morality and character. On the one hand, all the believing and righteous people will be separated from all the nations of mankind and put in one group. And on the other hand, people professing every false ideology and committing every kind of crime in the world will be sorted out from the multitudes of mankind and put into separate groups. In other words, the thing which Islam regards as the real basis of separation and union in the world and which the worshippers of ignorance refuse to accept, will become the basis of separation and union in the hereafter. Islam says that the real thing which joins men together or divides them is the belief and morality. Those who believe and build the system of life on divine guidance are one community, whether they belong to any race, any country and any region. The two cannot belong to one nation. They can neither walk together on a common path of life in the world, nor can meet with the same end in the hereafter. From the world to the hereafter they tread separate paths and have separate destinations. Contrary to this, the worshippers of falsehood have been insisting in every age, and still insist, that mankind should be classified and grouped on the basis of race and country and language. The people who have a common race and country and language should constitute a separate nation, regardless of their religion and belief, and should offer a common front against the other similar nations. And this nation should have such a system of life which should bind the followers of Tawheed and the polytheists and the atheists together. The same was the concept of Abu Jahl and Abu Lahab and the chiefs of the Quraysh. That is why they accused the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, again and again of having stirred up divisions in their nation. That is why the Quran is warning that the groups made in the world on wrong basis will ultimately break and mankind will be permanently divided on the basis of the belief and the philosophy of life and morality and character on which Islam wants to build it in the world. The people who do not have a common destination cannot follow a common way of life.